Welcome, Warriors.
Yay!
We are stoked that you're with us again this week.
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we've talked about unspoken competition in work, right? And all the ways that that can like show up and stuff. And so today we're talking about the unspoken competition in friendships.
Which is trickier, easier? What do you think? Same?
I think same, but different.
Okay.
Right?
Say more.
I guess when I'm thinking of unspoken competition, because after I said it, I was like, oh, people could interpret this multiple ways.
Right.
I guess I'm actually thinking about it in both ways. When I originally thought of it, I thought of it as like growing up, I had a lot of three-way friends. Like three of us were good friends. Right. And so in some ways, it always felt like we were all in competition with the other for the other person.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense, right?
Like, yeah, but was it always the same person?
Probably not, right?
Okay.
Right. It probably changed. And like I remembered like a lot in middle school and high school, like my one really good friend who has been mentioned a few times, like would tear me down, right? And it probably was because she felt like we were in competition, even though we were like super close, like BFFs, right? So there's that version of the unspoken competition, like competing with other friends for friendship, right? But then also just like the unspoken competition in friendships of trying to like one up each other or whatever. Right.
Okay.
So like I originally thought of it as like in a 3 friendship, right? Or like a friend with other friends and feeling like, oh, I need to be as good as those other people or my friend will drop me. Or it's like oh no, my friend and I like are secretly competing against each other, like when we run the mile at high school or when we this or that, right? So I'm taking it both ways.
So not necessarily all the time, at least in the way that I'm hearing it. Was it about what you felt like your relationship was to these two people or this one person or whatever? It was also like about sports and like well, you mentioned one-upping each other. So like, what do you, so like that was a interesting example. It's like, that wouldn't have popped into my mind about like who can run the faster mile, but that's interesting. Right. And I get it.
Yeah.
But then it's like, so my question is, which one of those two scenarios feels or felt harder to navigate? Or did you spend more time thinking about?
I think it depended on the friend, right? Like with my one friend, it felt like even though we were super, super close, we were in competition for everything, right? We both had crushes on the same guys. You know, we both, you know, like even I think I've referenced this person without ever saying this person's name. Like during Christmas, there was competition in who got the better like gifts, right? Like, so with this one friend, it was a lot of external competition because in some ways we knew we would always be friends, even though we're not now. Right.
Right. Sure. But in middle school and high school, you think you're always
and even friends, college, sure. 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah. I forgot who we were talking about for a second.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Right. There's a few.
Yeah.
And then in regards to other friends, I think it was more of feeling in competition with their friends so that I didn't lose them to other people.
Got it.
You know, which I think
so it really depended. So like it really, attachment. There isn't. Yeah. You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, so it's, so the first part about like trying to get the better gift or run the faster mile or whatever, that has nothing to do with your anxious attachment style, unless you're attached to winning or having what's perceived to be better.
Yeah.
In your, you know, adolescent mind or even like your mid-20s mind or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the anxious attachment obviously comes to play when it, or at least it sounds like, right, when you're talking about losing people to other people. So like, what do you think the underlying fear was? Like where how does the anxiety kind of come in then with that scenario?
Being abandoned
so just
by
just
your
that they would leave you. They wouldn't stop being your friend.
Yeah, there's cooler people out there, right? If I'm not being super cool, I'm going to be abandoned or rejected or, you know, whatever the narrative was back then. I mean, it was definitely fear of abandonment and rejection by people that I was super close with.
So what was the behavior?
Oh, that changed with whoever. But wait, I want to know how you define it. Like when we talked about unspoken competition and friendships, like what did you think? Right? Because I realized I actually had two thoughts.
Yeah, no, for me, it was just about well, if I'm going to go back to like my youth, right? Like my adolescence, it was definitely about the one-upping. It was just like nothing about like presents or whatever. And it was never one person or like a specific friend ever.
Yeah.
It was always just generally. It was just like I could look at the sea of people in my class, per se, and think, oh, those people over there have this better than me. I want more of that. Though this group over there has this other cool attribute. I want more of that. Right.
Yeah.
And so it was more like envy than it was jealousy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I felt like, and then that carried through my early 20s, mid 20s, and sometimes and then it became more dependent on the person specifically.
Yeah.
In like, say, even my late 20s. Where I would think about like, but then it was more about work stuff. I never felt that unspoken competition with people in my friend group ever. I don't have memory of that, it being about a specific person or thing. Like there'd be little things like, oh God, I love that thing that she's got, that one, whatever it was usually material.
Right.
You know? But then that was fleeting because then trends changed or something, and then that was no longer cool. And so like I was able to let it go pretty quickly. Like I don't remember ever having like deep-seated anxiety about stuff that would always kind of just like pass really quickly. And it was never like, oh, I need this one thing, right? Or it was more like looking at the masses around me where I felt the unspoken competition. Like in school, it was, you know, how well am I doing compared to the rest of my classmates, you know, on this last test, whatever. And it was never like about, say, my best friends or anyone that I was close with.
Right. So it was never like, you know, oh, they didn't invite me to go to the party with them. Or, I mean, I'm just thinking of something random, right? Or like when your friends were all getting married, it wasn't like, oh, you know, I'm afraid I'm not going to be part of their wedding party or like something like that.
No, not really.
I mean, I've never had that either with the wedding party, but those are like things that come up in friendships, right?
Right. Totally. I think that, you know, since you brought up wedding, like, because I've been in the same relationship for so many years, I do remember like it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I was one of the first people in my friend group to get married, but we'd been together for a decade because we were kids, right? Before we got engaged. And so many people were like, when's the ring coming? When's the engagement? And so like they were like shoving these thoughts down our throats all the time. And so I remember feeling like, well, if this doesn't happen within X amount of time, then something's wrong. Like we're having a problem. Meanwhile, there was no problem like at all. But I wound up being fed these external messages that like there must be something wrong or it's weird if you're not doing X by this time. And so it was like, then it became in my mind, well, if some of my friends that have only been in relationships for a short time get engaged before me, which didn't happen, that actually didn't wind up happening, but the thoughts came to my brain. I was like, I probably lose my shit. Like, even though that my relationship has nothing to do with theirs. And like, just because we've been together for a decade doesn't mean that like, you know, we were 16 also 17. Right. So it's like, we weren't those people that were going to get married at 21 or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it, that in particular, but it was never about like that one friend or like, I couldn't pinpoint like it's a certain person or certain types of people, but, yeah, I do think that as an adult, it's been interesting because my friend groups are different. So like I have my ride or dies from like childhood and college age or whatever that are still like very good friends. And then I had like no new friends because I've talked about this like on purpose. Like I didn't make friends with people at work or work environments or whatever. I steered clear and just said like, I'm good. I have enough people in my life. But then the last few years when I've been more intentional about making friends, I've noticed some of that come up a little bit. So it's been weird as like at the time, 30 something and now early 40 something experiencing that kind of anxiety about unspoken competition or like what you were saying about like vying for the attention of certain people.
Yeah.
Or like if I wasn't invited to that thing, should I read into that or whatever?
Right.
When it probably means nothing, like literally nothing. But yeah, so that's been sticky for me emotionally the last couple of years because I didn't really have a lot of that in my memory, at least in my youth, like at all.
Right.
And so it's weird because I feel like I've let go of all the unspoken competition that I felt about work stuff, which took a long time to let go of all that now, which is amazing. And now it's like I have the opposite, which it's like now I'm experiencing some of that friendship anxiety where I'm just like, now I'm like actively worried about losing people where like I didn't really think about that before. So yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I feel this. I feel all of it. The things that like come up for me when I'm hearing that and then also thinking in reflection of my own is like I feel like FOMO and like would have been a helpful term at least in middle school and high school and college for me because the anxiety and the anxious attachment also had like the FOMO piece to it, right? And it would all like, and for if anyone doesn't know FOMO, fear of missing out. But I think my bigger thing was what I just made up at this very moment, faux blow, which is fear of being left out.
Oh, okay.
And I think like I'm kind of hearing that a little bit in your stickiness too. Like it's okay for left out, but then do I read into it? Do I not? Like
right. It's more about the overthinking. And like but I'm able to tell myself right away, like, you're just overthinking. Right. So like that part's different.
Yeah. Right.
Where my younger self, my younger self would have stuck on the narrative or the overthinking for way longer. Yeah. Now it's just like I have that pang of like, oh, I wonder if I should read into X, or whatever. And then within a couple of minutes, I'm like, no, you're being silly.
Right.
I mean, and I mean it to myself. Like, and even if I'm wrong, let's just say there is a motive behind people not inviting me to a thing, which there very well may, could be, right? But I'm still able to let it go. I'm just like, whatever the motive was or wasn't, I'm good. Right. Yeah. Like it's all fine.
Yeah.
And I don't have that worry about losing the relationship. That's one thing I don't think that maybe sounds different between you and me in these scenarios is that I was never worried about losing the relationship or being abandoned.
Yeah.
That part does not feel true for me.
Yeah.
What feels true is that I was more concerned that I wasn't going to be special to that person anymore or something, or like, what I feel like makes our friendship or our connection unique might change. It was more about like the friendship changing or I become less important to that person as opposed to like they're going to just say there's somebody better out there that I'm going to go be friends with. Cause I don't think we're not in that space anymore where it's like, well, I'm just going to move on from you because someone's cooler.
Right.
It's more, at least in terms of the people that I know, I've cultivated relationships with the last few years. I know I'm speaking, correctly when I say like, none of these people are just going to be like, goodbye, you're not cool anymore. If anything, it'll just like the relationship changes, it fizzles, it peters out, or maybe it gets stronger, right? Like who knows what's going to happen with some of them. But yeah, I think it was less about like, I'm going to lose you and more about like, I'm going to lose that magic that we have together.
That spark. I feel it. Yep. Totally. Yeah. Also as you're saying this, like it makes me think of that song, Guilty, someone that I used to know.
Oh, yeah.
That song?
Somebody.
Yeah.
Now you're just somebody that I used to know.
And it just makes me like sad, right? Even though like I get it, right? Like we grow up and we change, but I think that is something that for me, like, you know, I wanted to cling to the friendships because not like I had that language or knew that song, but like I didn't just want them to become somebody that I used to know, right? Like wanted to keep that spark, like you're saying.
Yeah, right. Because it's like, and it's weird for me now because these relationships are still newer. When I say newer, they're like under 25 years because most of my good friends were like a ridiculous, like most of my life. It's way more than 25 years at this point. It's more like 30 years. And so then it's like I've got my friends that I've had for 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
And now I have friends that I've had for like 4 years.
Yes.
And that feels like significant in some ways and also kind of insignificant. You're just like, what is my attachment to these people? Like, what should I be practicing? Should I be practicing, you know, just seeing how things go organically? Am I really intentional with like making the plans or reaching out, text, you know, WhatsApp or like whatever the situation is like around our friendship? And then how much am I waiting for like reciprocation? Right. And so like navigating it feels like it does feel like a little bit of a baby deer situation for me because it's like I'm like an old doe when it comes to those other people. Like it's very relaxed. I know the dynamics of our friendship are so nailed down. But then these newer people, in some ways, I'm just as close with, it feels. And because of the age that we're at and because of how intentional we are about who we, you know, commit to having relationships with, it just changes how we are from the beginning. And so it was like a lot of that like early like fluff kind of BS was never in existence. And we like went straight for just like knowing each other.
Yes.
Which is really great in so many ways because it's like who has time to fucking, you know, deal with all the BS small talk and you know, pluffy kind of BS parts of a relationship. Let's just like learn about each other and be there
see
for
if
each
we
other.
Vibe. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And not just like once you're past the vibe stage, like, you know, committing to really being there for each other, right? And like shooting to that kind of quickly compared to some of my old relationships where like maybe it was a little bit, it took longer or it was more like playful and less like serious. Not that these relationships aren't playful because they are, but I know you know what I mean. It's just more like we're shooting straight for the heart at this point as opposed to like spending any amount of time just like talking about things that don't matter or connecting in really surface levels.
Right.
So yeah, it's a weird time, these 40s.
It is. It in so many ways it is. But just like, becoming friends with people in your 40s is also very different because like we don't have a long history. We don't have like that growing up in school and those like private jokes that we've had since we were like 8 or 12 or 16 or, you know, and in some ways, like there's like less, I don't know what word I don't want to say chaos, but less baggage in a sense in becoming friends in your 40s because you just kind of are who you are. Right. Versus like growing up with someone and then you change and they change and
that's fair.
You know, it's like there's a lot more like dynamics at play or like you don't like who they're becoming or you're realizing that they're toxic and and it's like all of that navigating in a long-term friendship versus like meeting people now. It's like, this is who I am. This is who you are. Right. You know, and then you can just dive right into.
Yeah. It's like you're not witnessing the evolution necessarily. You're just meeting a person for who they are. But then it's like, I guess if your relationship develops over the next 20 years or whatever, right, then you're going to be looking at that exact scenario.
Right.
But it was interesting when you said baggage because in my mind too, I understood when you kind of clarified about like where you're not seeing the evolution of a person over the course of many years, going from say childhood through like adolescence and into adulthood and beyond. But I felt like people our age though have a lot of baggage because they've lived, right, 40 something years.
Yes.
And so it's like, you're not necessarily witness to the baggage, but the baggage might be thrown at you in a way because of where a person is in their midlife, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's been so interesting for, Adam and I have been talking about, and it sounds funny because we've been like joking around about like, we're in our midlife. Like, hopefully we're just kind of like, I'm hopeful I'm in my midlife, but at the same time, you're just like, oh fuck, I'm so old. And so and the reason why
young, if it's my midlife, I'm the youngest I am right now.
Oh God, now I'm depressed. No. But the reason why it's come up kind of is because, we have people in our community and that are in our inner circle and outer layer circle of friends that are going through really adult things, right? They're going through a lot of chaotic, baggage heavy life stuff right now and have been for a little while, and or they're entering into a phase that's different. And so like, it's been interesting watching our friends, right, cope with stuff that um so yeah, like, just going back to what we're saying about having it be really different when you're with people throughout your life versus getting to know them in one part of your life and one part of their life.
Yeah.
And while you maybe didn't witness their lifelong amount of baggage, maybe you're still very much a part of, and hopefully a part of a support system, and they're a part of your support system, right? Where you're able to completely let go of the unspoken whatever, not just competition, but just like the unspokenness period, and just be there for each other. And that part's interesting. It's just interesting. It's different. It's very different. It's like navigating my friends in my 20s and teen years, certainly, and even most of my 30s. Their issues or their baggage or whatever is very different from supporting people now. And the same thing is true for shit that I'm dealing with, right? So yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's interesting to think about this age that we're at.
Yeah.
And for you warriors listening, it's like, you might be resonating with some of the stuff that we're saying because maybe you're around our age. Maybe you're quite a bit younger. Maybe you're, your situation, or older. Maybe situation could be completely different. But just think about, how does competition, whether it be spoken or unspoken, impact your friendships, impact your, maybe not just your friendships, but your relationships outside of the workforce? Because competition when it comes to work stuff feels like, I don't want to say normal because it probably shouldn't be, but it's the reality of being in the workforce, right? You're part of a capitalistic society.
Yeah, exactly. It's ingrained in us that if we don't
Right.
perform well, right, then
you don't move up, you don't get the promotion, you don't make
even
more money.
in school, it's ingrained in us that our peers
Totally.
are our competition, right? So in terms of work and performance and grades, like, that's ingrained in us at such a young age.
Right. But less so when it comes to relationships.
Right. Exactly. And that, that's the part where it's like, we're not taught how to necessarily navigate that, or how to repair when things come up, or, oh, my one friend's an anxious attachment and my other friend's an avoidant. Like, no wonder, like, there's so many issues, right? Like, there's, oh, this person wants to spend more time in the friendship and this person wants more space. And then the one feels rejected and, and the other one gets annoyed. And
here's my question to you. How do you, or do you first, and then if you do, how do you navigate when this kind of feelings come up, these kinds of feelings come up for you, or do they not anymore?
They don't. I mean, there's maybe like the tingliness of like a possibility, right? But like, it doesn't come up. But, I wonder, like, like, I don't have that many friends in Colorado, right? So I wonder, like, if I lived in New York, right, where I have a bunch of friends and they did things and didn't invite me, would the little sensation of anxiousness come up? Maybe, right? But at this point in my life, I know how to navigate that sensation. I know what that's coming from, right? And if I feel like I have a strong friendship, like, then I don't have the fear of rejection and abandonment the way I did in middle school, high school, college.
Right.
Right. But in all of those times, like when I would feel that sensation, it made me feel like I had to perform more. I had to give more. I had to people please more. I had to like be funny, and I had to like put on a show, and, you know, like all those things to get that attention, to be like, hey, look at me, I'm a special friend.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. It makes sense. So and like maybe we can take our last couple of minutes here before we start to wrap up. Like, what are some of the ways that what are the practices when you notice a sensation, right? What are the things that, or in the past, how did you handle it versus how you would handle it now? So like you obviously just mentioned like that you notice first, I guess, just noticing, right? That you're experiencing something, you feel it in your body, your mind, whatever. So like, what are some of the go-tos?
Yeah. Well,
we're moving through.
Back in the day, I would probably like I said, I do people pleasing and stuff, but also I would pick fights. Right. So back in the day, like
with the person like that you felt like wronged you or whatever.
Or I felt like in college, I had this friend. And when we first met, it was like just chemistry. It was like we were meant to be friends, right? We like were in the same dorm room, and we like just had the same personalities and so much fun. And then all of a sudden, the girl across the hall started hanging out too. And I did not like her. I thought she was super, super like Richie, stuck up, inconsiderate of other people. She made fun of me when I didn't know what Prada bags were. I was like, I don't like this girl. And she started to be my competition with my college friend. Right. And so I like when we would go out and party at some point in the night, I would feel insecure about my friendship. So I would pick a fight with my friend because I was upset that she was giving attention to the other person. Right. Like,
yeah. Okay.
I don't do that anymore. Right. Then in my 20s, when things came up that would bother me, and when I say 20s, I mean late 20s. Right. I don't mean early 20s. In my late 20s, when the alcohol was less, and things came up, I would try to have conversations about it. But what was lacking was my understanding of anxious attachment. Right. And so it was hard for me to see super clear, like, oh, this event that's happening is triggering a fear of abandonment. This event that's happening is triggering a fear of rejection. Right. And so I would try to have conversations, but they would just kind of go in circles because the people didn't understand me and I didn't understand them.
Yeah.
Now I feel like when I notice those tingles, I'm more just amused than anything. I'm like, oh, you anxious attachment. You do well like with me. BFFs, right? Like anxious attachment doesn't get to me as much as before my awareness and understanding of it.
Gotcha.
But so now I think that if something really came up, right, I would have a conversation, but with better language around my actual experience. Like, hey, Margot, when you did this, the way that it felt was I felt like that, like you were rejecting me, you know, was that your intention? And of course it wasn't your intention, but at least you would have an understanding about my experience so we could have a conversation about it. Like, oh, I didn't even think of you. And like, thanks. Right. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't like this imaginary scenario.
No. Okay.
I'm joking.
But you get what I'm saying, right? So
100%.
I would have better language to have a conversation if I was feeling rejected by a friend, that like someone that I cared about, right? Not like an acquaintance.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What about you?
I feel like it's pretty similar. I don't ever remember like the intentional fights. I do remember icing people out though. That was my method, was just full blown cold shoulder, like full ice queen Elsa. I was Elsa over here. Just leave me alone. I'm going to go beyond my ice palace. Don't talk to me.
You heard some anxious attachment hearts there. Ooh.
I know I did. And I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was doing too, without knowing what I was doing. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I just knew like this is going to hurt my friend and I'm upset. So I'm okay with hurting my friend. Right. And so it was sort of like, and And it breaks my heart to think about it now, because just thinking about some
You
of these
didn't
people
know.
that I love so much,
Right.
that I was ever that fucking petty and ridiculous with. But we all grow up. But
Yes.
I feel like it's pretty much the same as what you said. I don't necessarily, I don't remember if I've ever had the need to have a conversation with a friend about how I felt about it, because my preference is always, if I can, work through my own shit myself. So I can't remember a time when I had to bring like that fear or whatever, or that, hey, that what you said or did made me feel X, when it came to like my friendship with someone. But it was more of like kind of what I shared earlier in the conversation, which is just like not dissimilar to you. It's like I noticed sort of a change in I feel that tingling was a great word. It's totally the word that I wanted to use too.
Yeah.
It's just like that on discomfort in my belly. It feels like butterflies, but more like vomit butterflies and not like fun, excited butterflies. And then it's a lot of like, okay, how can I reduce those sensations into probably what I'm considering in my mind? What's going on with my thought loops? Oh, I'm sort of, sad that X and Y are doing that thing and I'm not there, right? But am I gonna tell them I'm upset? Probably not, right? I'm gonna say that's when I stop the narrative from becoming like, they hate you, they're talking about you, right? Like all of that kind of stuff, which I know is total BS. Like my higher self knows that. And then say, like, you're overthinking it, you're overreacting, without being unkind to myself. I say that. I
Right.
know I can say that to myself. I'm not being self-compassionate. I'm just like trying to snap my brain out of the thought loop by being like, you're being silly. Like, usually then the practice after that is to do something that brings me joy.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means I reach out to a friend, right? Maybe I'm just like, oh, I need some friendship connection. I'm more have like that FOMO, like they're having friendship connection. I want that. So what can I do about it? I have agency, right? I'm going to pick up my phone and maybe I text Abby, right? Maybe I, watch a stupid video on Instagram. Maybe I watch The Office, like whatever the situation, it could literally be anything, but I do something that's going to produce some joy in me, and like it'll help replace the feelings and the discomfort faster. And then I can reflect on it and be like, okay, maybe I need to reach out more. And like, and so I try not to overthink that either though, because at the same time, like when you mentioned people pleasing, that was where my thought went. It was like, if I feel like it's been a while since I've talked to a person, it should be incumbent on me to make sure I reach out next. That's not necessarily the case, right? And my recovering people pleaser side, maybe some of you warriors can relate, needs to practice not jumping to, you better reach out, otherwise your friendship, is going to change or whatever. And it's been, it's been good. It's been good for me these last few years, like practicing stepping back and just saying like, hey, I don't, I feel like I reach out a lot. I'm going to pause here and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you let people go, right? We had a lot of conversation about letting people go for various reasons. And I think that these thoughts can potentially go hand in hand, because at the end of the day, friendships are just complicated relationships.
Yes.
But we need them. We need friends, right? We need people that we're not in romantic partnerships with, that people who are not in our blood family, to be there to bring us joy, support us, and have all the experience with. So yeah, I think those are the kind of the go-tos these days. It's just sort of like, laugh at myself, right? Say, it's interesting that you're feeling X. What can I do now to help me feel supported? And if it means I need to talk to someone, maybe I do, maybe I don't. And I've appreciated, we had one friend reach out, me and a couple of people had done something, and they reached out and said that they were sad that they weren't invited. And of course, my immediate thought and what I said was, that was never the intention. And we love you so much, right? Which was all true. And I felt so proud of her for saying it. And at the same time, it was a good reminder for me that like, okay, it is okay if I ever do feel the need to say something. I'm not then potentially going to be rejected by them if I speak up about my, how I felt being left out of something or whatever. Or did you say left behind? Was that what you said earlier?
Fear of being left out. But
left out.
Yeah.
Better than left behind. Left behind's darker.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the practice.
I like that your friend said that, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's okay. Like, that's so vulnerable to be like, hey, I'm a little sad and I feel a little left out, right? Like, that's a very vulnerable thing to say because there's the fear of being dismissed, right? There's the fear of like your friends getting annoyed at you for speaking up. There's, and so that was really brave of them. And you're right. They're being a role model to say like, hey, we're in a friendship where we can speak up, even if it's like a little uncomfortable.
Totally. Yeah. Some of that just has to do with being older too. Like, I don't know how 20 something Margot would have received that.
Right.
Right. Or 30 something, even depending. But, yeah. So for all you younger warriors, this will be good things for you to practice now, which I'm sure many of you have been because you're being raised in such different environments.
Oh my gosh. I just want to say a side note. I was teaching yesterday and I off the cuff started, actually it was 2 days ago, talking about self-regulation to like kindergarten through second grade. There was one third grader. And I like said, I'm going to say a word, but then I'll talk about like, and I said self-regulation and this third grader was like, I know what it is. And then she like full on gave an amazing example and definition in third grade. And I was
good job, parents and teachers.
Yes. I like gave her and then everyone else in the class twinkles. And I was like, hey, you all are so ahead of the game right now. Right. So anyway,
true.
when we talk about younger warriors, like,
yeah,
damn, these like ones right now in elementary school know what self-regulation is and know how to practice it.
I mean, yeah, it's just the conversation around mental health, around anxiety, right? Like literally everything, social emotional learning. Oh, it makes my heart sore. And it's just some more reflections on why the work that we do is so valuable and so important, especially in the school setting. Oh, okay, warriors. Well, we hope that you enjoyed this combo. It was a little all over the place, but I mean, you've come to expect that, I imagine. We hope that you take a moment or some time to reflect on this topic this week. How does this show up for you? Do you feel like you that your attachment styles have anything to do with your relationships in terms of your friends? If you don't know anything about attachment style, Abby would tell you to go, at the very least, Google it right away. Figure out where you are.
Attached.
Buy that.
Then reach out to me for a conversation.
Yeah.
Probably 10 minutes in, I'll be able to tell you who you are, like which quadrant you fall under, and then give you some practices, right?
There you go. Boom. So yeah, take some time, think about, your relationships, your friendships, and if unspoken competition plays a role or played a role in your past. And what can you do now to, if it's still something that you're dealing with pretty regularly, what are some things that that might be worth giving a try? Changing up the narrative, self-reflection, having a conversation with those people, coming from a place of love and honesty. And then, of course, taking what they say to you, right, to heart to some extent, because it's like how they respond to your feelings about something that's going on or something that you're experiencing. It's going to be very telling about the nature of your relationship.
Yep.
Yeah. Abby, do you have a win of the week?
Win of the week. I do. This isn't coming up for a little bit, but this past weekend it was my husband's birthday.
Yay.
We celebrated. We had amazing food at one of our favorite restaurants. It was so amazing and so delicious. I learned this new thing about sake where like there's a thing where you like put a glass in a wooden box and then you pour the sake until it overflows over the glass into the box to represent abundance. And then you get served that way. So I got this like glass of sake that was like floating in a box. Anyway, this is not my win, but it was really fascinating. And at the end, technically you're supposed to like drink out of the box, the sake.
I was about to say.
I poured it in my glass and then.
Okay.
It was an interesting thing. And then on the Sunday, we had people over, which Dan and I rarely ever do. And we had an eggnog party and we had games that we played outside, like ladder ball and
ladder golf.
No, ladder ball.
Is that different from ladder golf? I don't know.
It's like you have some like two balls connected with a string
Yeah,
and you throw it at the opposite side. I don't know. Our thing says ladder ball on it.
Okay. Adam always called it ladder golf. I don't know why, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's a different game. It sounds the same though, but anyway.
Yeah. Played that. That was super fun. Played another game. That was super fun. We had like 4 people over, right? Felt like a lot for us when we barely ever have anyone over. And it just felt really successful and fun. And
yay.
it was a really good weekend. So that felt like a good win.
Love it. Happy birthday, Dan, many weeks later, but still. You are another year older.
He leveled up.
There you go.
Made it to our level.
That's right. Welcome to the new life, Dan. The 41 club. Yikes. All right, Warriors, we love you so much. Thanks for hanging out with us again this week. If you'd like to connect with us for any reason, you can join our Instagram family. We're at Anxiety Warriors Podcast. Feel free to shoot us an email at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your wins of the week, big or small. Share any topic ideas you have with us. Or if you think you would be a fabulous guest on our show, let us know. Let's get you on the calendar, help you tell your anxiety warrior journey. Please take a moment and smash that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're tuning in. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're feeling super generous, here we are, holidays right around the corner. You can hop on into our show notes and tap our Threadless merch shop link and grab yourself or the warriors in your life something fun.
Yeah. Generosity spreads kindness and more generosity, you know?
That's true. And also, since we're stuck in this capitalistic society, just give us your money.
Yeah. I mean, we could just put our Venmos
in the form of
at that point.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We are so grateful that we get to do this with you all.
Till next time.